Hi, and welcome to today's edition of Mermaid Tears. Today I am going to talk to you about how to rate your sea glass. It's important to note that there is no industry standard on how to rate sea glass. And I also want to point out that even if your piece of sea glass doesn't have any monetary value, it does of course have some type of personal value to you, or you would not have picked it up. While today's video is not about color, I will of course mention it very quickly since that is the first point that we want to consider. The colors that you see here are the most common colors to find, and they are your whites, your browns, and your greens. So when it comes to rating sea glass, obviously the rarer the color, the increased odds of it having a greater value monetary wise there are, and sometimes even personally as well, because it's really fun to go through and just be like, whoa, I actually found myself an orange or a yellow or a red, which trust me, I have celebrated many, many times. Black is a color that is often overlooked. It's often just assumed to be a petal, as well as the darker plum color here is often also overlooked. And you can notice that my orange pieces and my yellow pieces are really quite small, so it's important to really take the time to dig through and find those as well. When I'm talking about the frosting on your piece of glass, I'm talking about the crystallization that happens as the glass goes through its hydration process. And this is simply that white film that you see kind of on top of the glass, or that little bit of a coating. And that coating is based on the pH levels of the water, the amount of sun exposure that the piece has seen, and sometimes even the actual content of what was in the bottle originally. After you've gone through and figured out the different colors or categorized your sea glass by the different colors, you want to note the frosting of the sea glass. And again, this is just the overlay of the crystallization that happens on the sea glass. I've tried to set out here for you a couple of examples. I hope you can see them easily on the paper. As you can see, the piece on the right is always going to just have a little bit more of that crystallization than the piece that you see beside it. Shape, size, thickness is an interesting one for me, just because as a general rule of thumb, the thicker it is, the older it is, and that's in theory due to the repetitive motion of it going around in the water and of course folding in on itself and getting a little bit thicker. That being said, depending on where the piece of glass is found, of course there's always an exception to the rule. If it's an extremely rocky area, it's very easy for the pieces of glass to get trapped in the rocks and not have as much opportunity as they might to tumble through the process. The other thing that thickness and shape can help you to determine is what the piece originally came from. So that's kind of interesting. Obviously, if it's the shape of a bottle bottom or a lip, then you know what it's from, and from there you can hopefully go down and figure out where it has emerged from that. So here I've just shown you a couple of examples of how one piece of glass is thicker than the other piece of glass. Now obviously this one here is never going to be that size or vice versa, but what can happen is a little piece like this can roll up into a piece like that. Now I'm showing you a different color because I don't have a red that's already started to form a marble. I only wish that I could be so lucky. So this one here is what happens as the piece gets older and continues to tumble around. So I'll show you some examples here as they just tumble around and get a little bit thicker. I've also been fortunate enough to find some really interesting pieces. I've got one here that was obviously the handle of something, and then this one here which was obviously the lip to some type of a bottle, and then I have this really little one, sorry the focus there is a little bit off, but this really little one here, I don't know how easily you can see it, that was the top piece of some type of bottle. And the final thing that you want to look at is whether or not your pieces have any distinguishing marks that may help to identify what they were originally, and that can help you to determine where it may have come from or what it was used for, and also of course the age of the piece. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's edition of Mermaid Tears, and I hope that you've learned a little bit about how to rate your sea glass. I'd love to have your comments and your feedback, and I've got more information on my website, mermaidtears.ca. I look forward to visiting with you guys again next week.